Up to this point, I've played 21 Data East games on the Famicom, and they have had a bumpy road. While there have been some good games, the best Data East games on the Famicom weren't developed or published by them. They handed those off to Namco. And much of what they published themselves was so awkward that Famicom fans in Japan dubbed it Dekoge, spinning the term kusoge, or crap game, into something specifically for them. Metal Max is the last Data East game on the Famicom. They are the largest publisher to date to exit the system. And after 4 years and 51 weeks of some really rough junk on the Famicom, they go out with one hell of a bang. Metal Max is the first game in a long-running series. While it was never wildly popular, it had a dedicated following that sustained it through trademark disputes and multiple companies failing underneath it. Most of the series hasn't been released in English, though there was a PS2 game under the title Metal Saga, which was what the series changed to when the trademark was in dispute, and the two most recent games have been localized. In fact, the most recent game was released 3 months before this recording. The series is about a post-apocalyptic world where mutants and giant robots roam the wasteland. The heroes in these games get in their tanks and set out to make their fortune, because these are some very early examples of open-world RPGs. You'll be pointed towards dungeons and other major things, but really, it's just about building yourself up and seeing what you can find. This initial game was marketed with the tagline, "I'm bored of fighting dragons," and Metal Max delivers on that. There is a small plot here. You're a young boy who wants to be one of the explorers of the wasteland, and when your father walks out on you, you don't have a choice but to do that in order to make money. The rest of the plot is mostly optional. You can skip recruiting characters, or just walk around major quest lines. There's even multiple endings depending on what you choose to do in the game. And when you do get to the ending, it's not the actual end of the game. You're still free to explore the world after you've defeated the final boss. The interface is fairly standard for a Famicom RPG, though presented with a bit more panache. Hit the A button to bring up a menu where you could choose to talk to people, check out your equipment, search your surroundings, but you can also choose to get on and off a vehicle. On foot you have more mobility. You can just walk over the rubble piles. But tanks have to go around things. In town there's a lot more going on than just visiting the shops. There's an Explorers Guild, which is where you save the game, but you can also check out the wanted posters there, and if you've hunted down that person, they'll pay you for it. And if you choose to buy things from vending machines, you could get a bonus item if the dot lands in the middle. Metal Max packs a surprising amount of detail in the towns. You can even jump off of some buildings. You can play mini-games against bar patrons, interact with way more things than it seems like, and eventually you can even decorate your room. The other major thing you need to do in town is modify your tank once you have it. You can swap out a lot of parts on your tank, and depending on how strong the engine is and how much more weight the chassis can carry, you can vary the amount of armor on it. And that brings me to combat. Naturally, as you explore you'll have random encounters, and battles play out differently if you're on foot or in a tank. On foot, it's about what you'd expect. You can attack, defend, use an item, and you have to manage your hit points. Tanks are much more powerful than your on-foot weaponry, but they're constrained by having limited resources. Armor that is blasted off your tank is gone forever. You have to purchase more of it in town. Once the armor is gone, every hit that connects has a chance of damaging some important system on the tank, and that can lead to more costly repairs. Tanks can only carry a finite amount of ammunition for their main gun as well. There are 3 weapon systems on the tank, and in combat you choose which one to use. The main gun does a ton of damage, but if you're not fighting enemies who need that shell, then it's a waste. Secondary weapons are things like machine guns, and they don't use up any of your precious ammunition, but they are much weaker. And finally, special weapons use up extra ammunition, but have more devastating effects. There are 8 different kinds of tanks that you can find in the game, and for most of them, you'll have to modify the tank in order to use something other than their default weapon. The first tank you find, for example, has the main gun but nothing else, while an armored car comes with a machine gun but no main gun. I found progression to be relatively fast in this game. In the hour I was playing, I got to level 5 and explored 2 full dungeons, plus found my first bounty. You don't start out with a tank, so you have to explore the first dungeon on foot before one will become available to you. As a game that launched an RPG franchise, naturally, Metal Max has a pretty good reputation in Japan. It's often pointed to as one of the top RPGs on the system. I don't know where I'd rank Metal Max, but it's definitely up there. Its biggest weaknesses are that it is an open-world RPG that lets you go wherever and do whatever. So there's not a lot of story, and there's not a lot of guidance. And using tanks in combat tends to not be very straightforward. It's still a very cool game though, with a lot of creative flourishes. It's arguably the best game that Data East published on the Famicom. Where were they hiding this talent until the last minute?